Okay, the first thing on our agenda here, we have 2 meeting minutes. The first one is for 4 February of 20, no, let me back that up. Yeah, 4 February, 4 February of 2020. Yeah,
You're right.
I know she sent them out. I looked at them.
Yep, I read them.
Yep. It's kind of hard to remember we did that long ago, but
If there's no changes, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion, no discussion, I'll make a motion to approve.
okay, do we have a second?
I don't think you have a quorum to do that.
We've got myself, we've got you, and we've got Brian. All we need is 3. And
I
Lil
was
is an
showing it.
alternate.
I was showing absent at the meeting, though.
You're showing what?
Yes, Jim.
Oh, he's absent at the meeting. Well,
Yeah.
Lil
Right.
is an alternate, and since we don't have Glenn and we don't have Bill, she can take their place.
Lil was
Okay.
absent.
I'm good with that.
Okay,
I'll
I'll
abstain.
second.
Okay, Lil seconded. Any more discussion?
Before you
Discussion?
go, hold on. Lil was absent from the meeting.
Oh,
that's
she was
right.
absent.
That's
Gary?
right, I was.
Yeah,
Okay.
Gary, Bill Porter, myself, and Jay. So when you wanted to, either Bill or Gary to come on.
Okay, so let's move over to the meeting minutes for 15 September. How's that?
Sounds good. Likewise, I read them. I didn't see any.
Yeah, I just didn't print them out, so I don't have them in front of me.
Let's see, Jim, you were there. Lil was there. I was there. Jay was there. So we do have a quorum now. I'll say the same thing to you. I read them. I see no changes, submissions. If there's no other discussion on it, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we accept.
And do we
I'll-
have a seconded, please?
I'll second.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, we're being recorded as of now. Lil, did you hear that Jim seconded?
Yes, I did.
Okay, any further discussion on the 15 September 2020 meeting minutes? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Jim's and
Aye.
I.
Liz and
Yeah.
I.
Okay, that's 4 ayes, so there's only 4 of us here, so there's no abstentions and no objections. So we'll move on here. Land acquisitions on the businessman's recommendations. Do we want to consider anything with the Cooley Park? Because the Parks Oversight Committee said we are welcome to it, because they can't use it because it's too bug infested. Do we
What would-
want to
What would you use?
have conservation look at it, see if it's possible for maybe a solar field or something? Because I don't know how much of it is usable. I know there's quite a bit of land, but I don't know how much is usable and how much is conservation.
You have 2 soccer fields and 2 ball fields you can put on there without any problems.
Yeah,
No,
well,
no.
two
One never-
soccer fields.
One never knows what happens in the future. And the reason you have bugs down here is because you're near swamps and never gets sprayed and it never gets cut back.
I was just gonna say that it's not maintained.
Well,
Did you-
do we want to, because I know you're on that Parks Oversight Committee too, right, Brian?
Yes.
Is it something you want to talk to them about doing some of that and keeping it, or shall
Well,
we go by their suggestion and do something with it?
Well, give me a second and let me kind of explain something.
Okay,
Land as time goes on and when I'm gone, land is going to be harder and harder to find. Okay.
Mhm.
Currently, we have enough ball fields. Currently, we have enough soccer fields. But what's going to happen 20, 25, 30 years down the road? Okay. We don't know. It's always good to have something available in case you need it. Now, we did talk about West Street School, and we did talk about the fact that we could possibly put fields out there in the future, which is all well and good. So it's kind of a flip of the coin whether it's used or it isn't used. It's just,
If I can
I don't know.
pipe in, it's not real productive land where if we put it on the market, it was worth anything. It's not really buildable because of the swamps and the high water table.
That's correct.
So to your point, to hang on to it, maybe down the road, it could be used for sports fields. Maybe, down the road when actually that area might be conducive to a substation of some sort in the
Wait, I missed that, Jimmy. What, conducive to what?
it might even be conducive to a on slab type of fire station or something like that, a substation.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the land isn't really, in my opinion, isn't worth anything to put it on the free market. I don't even think you could put solar in there, Jay, because of the way it's set up with the growth.
I don't know. I just know there was quite a bit of acreage and the requirements for solar are a whole lot less than putting in an actual building.
Yeah, but with the setbacks and everything today,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you could get much of a solar field in there.
Okay. I say, I haven't looked at the land because the same thing comes out about the Sandy Pines State Park. They were looking us if we wanted it. That's the old Westover antenna farm off of, was it Green something Lane there? Green Meadow Lane, I think it is.
Yes.
Yes.
And I've never been out there myself. I mean, I can look at it from Google Maps. And it's a large area. It does have conservation there, land. It does have land for ball fields and all stuff like that. And I think you can access it from Kellogg Street too, Brian, am I not mistaken?
You,
No.
No, there's another street that looked like it could exit. And
Lyman
into it.
Street.
what is it?
yes,
Lyman.
Lyman Street, okay.
Jimmy,
So,
have you,
I mean,
I'm sorry, Jay, I was just gonna ask Jim.
okay.
I haven't been out there lately, Jim. It's been probably 15 years since I've been out there. What, has it grown in that much? I mean, there was some open areas.
No, it's grown in. It's believe me, it doesn't take long, but it's pretty much all grown in. And I'd be concerned with soil contamination. Is it on the market? Are they looking to donate it? But
Well, DEP has all the paperwork that Westover has cleaned it 100%, and it's all DEP certified. It's clean now. They took tons and tons of stuff out of it.
yeah.
So is
So
it, yeah, go ahead. Jimmy's question was, do we know if it's on the market?
DEP did ask us if we were interested in it. If they weren't asking commercially, they were asking us as a town.
Okay, the way,
if the property was clean and we could do our own certification of it, then I think that would be a great piece of property to pick up and hold. It's first of all, it's not on the tax docket now because it's owned by the feds, right?
I think it's owned by the state, isn't it?
Well, either way,
Well,
that's federal.
the state does pay taxes.
No, you're saying that's state property? And Westover owned it?
I thought it reverted to the state, but I could be wrong because I haven't really done a whole bunch of investigation on it because I didn't know it was worth investigating.
the way it works, if the federal government owns it, they go to the state. If the federal government doesn't want it, no department within the federal government wants it, it goes down to the state. State departments then have a chance to bid, request it, do something with it. If they don't want it, if nobody comes forward in a period of time, then it goes to the local. If the local refuses it, then it goes to the outside. So if it's in the state and DEP picked it up, I don't know why DEP would pick it up. Usually it's natural resources. But if it's within the state, the next option is to offer Granby the property if nobody wants it within the state. And at that point, and you guys can tell me I'm right or wrong, you don't want to give up a piece of property like that to, anybody else.
If it's clean and we can certify that it's clean, then the town should pick it up.
I would concur. Agreed.
I have no problem with that either, but again, haven't done a whole lot of investigation on it for the simple reason, not much is known about it, except the paperwork from Mass DEP states it is all clean now, inspected by them, and tons of earth and everything has been removed from it, from the federal government, Westover paid to have it all removed.
Bill, can I ask Bill a question? Bill, are we actually getting in-kind taxes from the state on this property?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay, so that means the Fed doesn't pay taxes, so the Fed, it must still be in federal hands then.
Okay.
But we don't get taxes on state property.
I didn't think so.
You don't
I
get
thought we
taxes.
did.
No, you don't get taxes. Don't you get in-kind? Isn't there some sort of, it goes towards the cherry sheet?
All I can say is I'm not aware of that, Brian.
Okay.
But I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not aware of that.
I think there's an area on a cherry sheet where the state gives you a certain amount of allocated, certain amount of money for a property that they have within the boundaries of your community. The Fed does not do that.
Like the old police station on 202, the state owns that. And I'm not aware that we get any money from that.
But you don't get money. You don't get money. You just get
Okay,
relief.
it's on the, okay, gotcha, on the sheet.
It's relief. That's all it is.
Yep.
So, Brian, seeing you're on the land review committee with myself,
Yes, Jim.
why, if this property was being offered, it would go to the select board, right?
Yes, it would.
And it would be more of a select board issue than a economic development issue first.
Correct. It seems to me that the select board would at least go to our committee, Jenny, and ask for our thoughts on it, and then make their decision on whatever they want to do with it. But I think with what they've been trying to do today, and Jay, you can correct me if I'm right or wrong here, but I think the board kind of looks for our committee to give them ideas, and of course the decision's always theirs.
Yeah, I'll speak for myself. I listen to the boards and committees that report to the spec board. I won't speak for anybody else.
Okay.
Just like I'm always trying to throw stuff at the Parks Committee and stuff like that, just like, well, we'll get to that in a minute. Because why have these boards and committees if we don't use them?
Well, I'm just kind of curious why the Economic Development Committee is discussing it if it's not something that's been proposed to the select board and they're asking our opinion on it.
The select board at one time, the Energy Committee proposed to them that they would like to create the Granby Electric Department, which is allowed by Massachusetts law because electricity is being generated in our town now. Not by water, but by solar. The law, Massachusetts law, only states that the electricity has to be generated in your municipality and you can have a department to regulate it. Example, if you were to Google Ashland, in the first year they saved their residents $745,000 in electric rates. Because as they created an electric company that was solar and wind. And what happened is they offered all this electricity to their constituents. And of course, the people bought in for it because it was cheaper. And to me, $745,000 in electric rates, if they can do it in Ashland, but it is bigger than us, of course, is something worth considering because we're always short revenue. Maybe the revenue won't 100% go to the town, but as a town resident, I don't think a town resident cares where it's coming from as long as they don't have to pay less.
Okay, so my question is, how does that correlate with this piece of property we're looking at on Green Meadow Lane?
Because during the discussion of the electric department, that was one of the properties that was brought up that could be possibly created into a solar field to either be leased by the town to somebody, or if the town chose, they could build their own.
But if I can interject here.
Yeah.
What happens with federal property? The federal government is really slow on the draw. I actually don't think they know what they have in most communities. I go back a number of years ago to Brown Ellison's a perfect example.
Yeah.
That was very similar. Brown Ellison was just about the same as what we have, at the end of Green Meadow Lane. I was on the Playground Commission at the time, it was 1972. We approached the federal government and asked them if there was a possibility that we could acquire that property for recreation. First of all, they had to figure out whether they had the property and what use it was, what were they doing with it, and it was nothing. This was all Philadelphia, Department of the Interior, and it took a while. First thing they had to do is they had to check with other federal organizations to see if they wanted it. Then they had to go through the state, and come 1973, 1974, I think it was, took a year and a half, 2 years, they decided that the state didn't want it, the Fed didn't want it, the state didn't want it, so it was up to the local government. So then there were organizations within the local government that had their choice. It was a case of the Playground Commission back then and the Conservation Commission going after the piece of property. The Playground Commission ended up with the property for passive recreation. The next thing we try to do is to go across the street from Brown Ellison. The U.S. Department of the Army had control of that property, but it was sat vacant for years. They did absolutely nothing with it. And so we tried to get that piece of property also. What ended up happening was we woke the Army up, sleeping giant, and you can see what they've done to it today. They've developed it, they use it for war games. But that's how it starts. If we're looking at that piece of property, I don't think the federal government's going to come down to us and say, here it is. We need to go to them and say, hey, what are you doing?
Okay, so with that being said, Brian, I get where you're coming from. So Jay's talking about using it as a solar field for the town to go into the solar business to generate electricity. If in fact the town can do that, then the town needs to spend some money to say, with all the regulations on solar, can we do that there? Come up with a business plan and get the town to buy off on it, and then approach them to see if we can acquire the property. If that's where you're going, Jay, there's a process to do that.
Yeah, I understand that. And I'm just saying, according to the Massachusetts law, because we have existing solar fields in our town now, we can create an electric light department. Now,
yeah, but you can
only regulate
in a cubicle. You don't need 30 acres to do that.
Well, that is a true statement, but all I'm trying to say is anything that is pre-existing before you create your electric light department, you don't regulate. So it behooves us to create the department, but this select board really hasn't had any interest in it. Even they were shown on how much revenue the town of Ashland was able to save their residents. And basically in economic development, we're all about making money for the town, and I look at it, saving money for the residents. Doesn't make a difference. Like I said, as an individual, I don't care if you save me money or you get revenue from somebody else to pay my bills. Doesn't make a difference. It goes in the same pocket as far as I'm concerned. Or we just want to leave that sitting there and we'll discuss it the next time we have a meeting, give people time to go over it.
Mike, if I can make a suggestion,
Sure.
he's gonna hate me for this, because he's a busy guy, but could you ask Chris if he can find out where it is, where the property is at this point? Is it in the federal government? Is it in the
I
state?
think I have the records on it. One of my ski partners is Mike Gorski. He's the regional director for Mass DEP.
Right.
I could call Mike and I can get anything I want for it, who owns it, what its shape is in, like that. If you want me to take that action, I'll give Mike a call.
I would say that'd be the first step. Let's try that and then go from there. Your ideas and the thoughts and ideas that you have are good. The first step would be to find out about the property. What are they willing to give it up at this point in time? If they are, they would, can they start going through the procedures and then find out as Jimmy's saying, you can find out whether the town is in a position to take it. We don't have to buy it, Jim. It comes free. But I know your concern is the property itself. Is it safe? Environmentally, is it taken care of and safe?
And if what your intentions with the property are fall within the allowable, do that. And again, we're a subcommittee of the select board. So, Jay, with all due respect, I know you sit on the select board, but that should be a directive from the select board. It can be a suggestion from us, but we need a directive from the full board in order to move forward on. They may not be interested in it, or they may, but they need to get this. The select board needs to give us the authority to move forward, and that doesn't mean to be disrespectful to you, Jay.
I'm not taking it, but ideas can come from anywhere, the high side or the low side. It's just
Exactly.
putting it through the chain of command and how it works.
Exactly, and that's my point. If you want to reach back to the select board and say, that the Economic Development Committee is interested in acquiring this property if it meets certain criteria, then if the select board buys off on it, then by all means, I would be for it.
Okay, what I'll do is I'll give Mike a call. I'll get all the documentation on that area and I will forward it to everybody on this committee. And then, as Brian says, it's going to be a long drawn out process anyways if we decide to go forward. So I don't think it's an immediate concern to worry about. And we'll review it. And if we think it's advisable, then we'll approach the select board and say, hey, do you want to consider this? How does that sound?
I'm okay with that.
Okay, I'll take that action. You got that action from me, Lil?
Yeah, what about Cooley Park?
Again, I don't know the answer to that, so I was asking Brian. I think it'd have to be reviewed by the Conservation Committee to see what's usable, what isn't. I don't know.
Well, that particular piece of property is not, this Cooley Field itself was given to the Granby Board of Selectmen, okay? The property around it is conservation, but that particular piece was given to the town of Granby for recreation use.
Okay,
You have to go back to the acceptance of the property, and I think you'll see that that's what it was. Because I was on, honestly, I think I was on the Board of Selectmen at the time. So I think it came down to that piece, that parcel is recreation, and the other part is conservation.
okay, so that stays where it is.
Well,
I don't have a problem with that, but I mean, we did get a memo, I think it was signed by Lou Barry, that, and it went to the Energy Committee, says, if you guys want this for solar, go ahead, because we don't have no use for it.
today, that was the problem today. You have no use for it today.
Right, well, I'm just saying that's what was said.
The most
So-
important thing that any board in this
Mhm.
community can do is look down the road for our
Mhm.
children and our grandchildren. And
I
it's
agree.
very important. You know, once you give land away, you can't get it back.
Mhm. I agree entirely. Okay, so we'll just let Cooley Park sit as it is. I'll get some information on Sandy Pines and send it to everybody. And then at our next meeting, we'll discuss it and see what if we want to do any more research or we want to forward it to the select board for their consideration or whatever. Okay, after that, remember those 5 acres on Route 202, 2 West State Street?
Mhm.
It's owned by Irene Rappa. Is her name R-A-P-P-A?
Mhm.
It was given to me. She is looking to donate the land to the town. That's the same 5 acres that would give us access to the 19 plus acres behind it that's landlocked.
Yep.
The only thing she's asking for at this point in time is she would like a playground built on some of that land for kids. Because her and her husband did not have any kids. And she would like a memorial plaque put on that playground in honor of her husband's military service. Now, we have discussed that at the select board. And I did suggest that it be flowed down to the Parks Oversight Committee and to the Conservation Committee. Because number one, again, just like the 19 plus acres behind there, some of it's usable and some of it's conservation. And since she's requesting a playground, something has to be done with the design of the playground, similar to what the Parks Committee did with the dog park. And see what they come up with, and it satisfies to her, then she would donate that land to the town. So
Jay, we had this discussion at the last meeting.
I don't
And-
remember, we hadn't had a meeting in so long.
Yeah, well, anyway, we had this discussion at the last meeting.
Okay.
Brian wasn't in attendance. And basically what I said was if the select board was interested in it, they usually bring it to the Land Review Committee, which Brian sits on, along with myself. And one of the concerns I would have with that piece of property before we take free is that it's adjacent to the dump. It's actually downstream. And there's properties that are upstream of the dump that have had water contamination. And I think it needs rather than just take it at its face, I've got concerns about taking over a piece of property that has the potential of contamination. That's just one piece of it. I mean, it sounds like a great idea to give us access to something that, again, may not have any use other than it may end up having more of a burden to the town. So again, it should go through the process, through the select board. If it's a piece of property they're interested in, they should ask the land review committee to take a look at it. And sometimes the committee looks at it as a tax base, taking it off the tax base. Is it worth it? And in this case, I'd have other concerns about contamination, not just
Okay,
taking
then-
it off the tax base, but there's other issues.
As-
So to me,
like
to
I
go
said,
through
at the
another
last
process.
Select board meeting, it was discussed, and I recommended going down to the Parks Committee and Conservation Committee to find out, is it usable? Those are my statements, if you look at the tape. I don't know. And that's the way it was pretty much left. So at the next select board meeting, I will ask the same questions and recommend it be sent to the land use committee. And I have no problem doing that. In fact, I remember correctly, I said there's 3 committees that should be involved: the land use, the conservation, and the parks. The reason for the parks is the playground. But I don't think it's moved anything since then. But I know Chris Martin has been on the phone with the lady. Because at first it was me and I gave it back, I gave it to Chris after. Because Kathy Leonard first gave it to me. Then after I talked to her, I gave it to Chris.
Who would, could I interrupt here?
Sure.
Who would have a better handle on the water? Who would have a better handle on any type of contamination?
I'm gonna guess our own conservation committee. I don't know anybody else that does it unless we go to Mass DEP or something.
Could be Board of Health. You'd have to do test holes, Brian.
Yep.
You'd have to take some samples. And I know all of Morgan Street, or 3/4 of Morgan Street, they had Waste Management bring in water because their wells were, and they're on the upside of the dump.
Okay.
Okay,
I'm just throwing it out there.
well, that's
no.
fine.
Everything sounds, it sounds good on the surface, but I think we need to take the proper steps to go through the process before the town, jumps on something and doesn't end up with a liability.
I have no problem with that at all. Like I said, I recommended it going to 3 committees, and then Chris Martin was gonna talk to the lady, and I haven't heard anything since then. If she would like to do it now, before she passes, because she's 85 years old, and she wants to see what it looks like before she passes, the way she put it,
Yep.
not me.
Yep, I think it's a very generous offer.
Yeah, it's assessed at 73,000. Okay, so I'll take that as an action to give it to the select board and recommend it go to the land review committee, and then you guys can dictate you want holes drilled for the Board of Health, Conservation, or whatever you want to do.
Bill Shaheen sits on the board as well. He's with Conservation, so he'd certainly have.
Mhm.
Well, so the board's made up of some folks with some experience on that. So if it gets tossed down to that committee, then I think it would be a good idea to let them run the gamut on it.
I don't have a problem with that at all. But I'm just trying to move something along.
Nope, I think and I'm glad that you are. I just think there's a process to do it with, that's all.
Yeah. And since Bill's here now, I'd like to move back to the minutes of 4 February. Can we do that? Since we'll have a quorum on the minutes of 4 February, that'll make Lil happy.
No, I'll still make that motion to accept.
Okay, we have a motion to accept the meeting minutes of 4 February. We need a second. It's gonna have to be you, Bill.
I don't remember them, but I'll second the motion.
Okay, is there any more discussion on the meeting minutes of 4 February 2020? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I can see all the hands go up. So you got 3 ayes on it, Lil.
Okay, and one abstain, Jim.
Yeah, because he was not there. And if you want to abstain yourself, that's up to you.
Well, you don't need my vote. You've already got it, so.
Right, but I'm just saying, if you wanted to, it doesn't make a difference to me. Since I guess this is all we're gonna have for our total committee meeting tonight, I have already advised the select board and the energy committee that when my term on the select board is up, that I will not be running for, again. The reason for that is I like a nice clean turnover of all the stuff by giving them advance warning or whatever you want to call it. I don't plan on running again, the select board. I do not plan on staying on the energy committee, and I don't plan on staying on this committee. I'm getting out completely. And I'm just trying to do it because if we move things forward, I don't want to have stuff that I'm not going to be here to address. And I just want to make the other members know. So if we got stuff, example, the stuff we're discussing, if it's going to go past my term, then somebody else is going to have to pick it up. That's all I can say. Okay, next thing on our agenda is for Bill Porter. It was the short-term tax incentives. You were going to talk with the other Board of Assessors.
Say it one more time.
There was something I'm looking about short-term tax incentives for new businesses.
We have
And
not
Yeah.
taken that up because of our meetings have been very brief the last 7 months.
Okay, so we'll just leave it as an open issue?
Yes, that's fine. It's still on our agenda
Okay,
of
That's
things
okay.
to do.
I'm just going down our agenda list to make sure we
Yeah,
cover
that's fine.
everything.
That's fine.
Okay, the next item is the Route 202 upgrade. It's scheduled for the spring of 2021. As of 31 October, we should find out how many businesses have committed to the water pipeline. Because South Hadley has requested that we get commitment letters from all the businesses on that segment. Because if you've got less than 40% going to commit to that water pipeline, they're afraid there might be water quality issues. So every property owner, business and so forth have all got letters, and they got to 31 October of 2020 to reply. If we got 40% or more, that, and they got to send in $2,000 with the commitment letter too. If we get 40% or more, then what happens then is our representatives are going to have to go to Mass DOT and get us our in-kind funds back. Because right now, when they stopped doing the Route 202 project on for 2020, Mass DOT took the in-kind funds back. And we'd have to have them reinstated to afford the project. Because we only have 1.2 million and it's gonna take like 1.6 or probably 1.7 now to finish it. And with the in-kind funds from the state, they had promised us 560,000. If we got all of that, then we'd have the money to continue with the project. If they don't have the money for in-kind funds, then we don't have enough money to fund the project. So that's the status of the Route 202 project. Any questions on that? Or wait till next chapter?
Do you know how many people, how many businesses have committed to that? Or aren't you familiar with that?
When I looked at it on the sheet that Nicole generated for businesses out there, for the property, there was 30 properties, but of the 30 properties, only 18 had an actual building on it. So you take 40% of 18, you got like 9 or something. And I'm pretty sure they have that, if not close to it. I know Kathy has told me that Granby Motel has already sent their money in. The vet has sent her money in. Subway has sent their in. Tanya's has. Little Italy has. I have to go back in my emails to look at the rest of the ones that, and of course, we got our own senior center there, which could pump in one vote on it as well. And that's just from the top of my head. But
Okay.
when you get to 40% of 18, that's not a whole lot.
So Jay, let me ask you a question. So they're asking for $2,000 per business for commitment.
That's
What's-
what South Hadley's asking, yes.
Yeah, what's the total? Commitment.
It's, if you're within 100 feet of the water pipeline, and I say you, I mean your building. You're within 100 feet of Route 202, it's $2,000 for South Hadley to install the meter. And then to have it piped into your building, the town would be paying for the pipeline and all the stubs as part of the construction. But the individual business costs, and this is an estimate from Marion Excavation to install the 1-inch copper pipeline, they said $35 a foot. Because I guess they do it on a regular basis. I didn't know they did our new school excavation.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, I didn't know that. But
They were a subcontractor under Fontaine.
Okay.
So,
Yep.
um,
And
This
all
is
that cost is all spelled out in the letter of commitment that was sent to all the property owners. And additional to that, because we started the project before COVID-19 came out, the Small Business Administration has already approved small business administrative COVID-19 funds for offset the expenses. And they could apply for that. It's either 2 or 3% interest rate for as long as 30 years. And that was sent to all the property owners as well.
well, wouldn't you think the town would take a larger interest in it? And you're talking probably, from what you're telling me, that's small money
Yeah,
to move it up the road, whether they contribute or not.
the select board has taken the position that we're not going to ask the residents for more than 1.2 million. And every property owner is going to have the responsibility of paying for their own installation.
Well, that's fine, but as long as it runs past them, the town's flipping that bill. It's only $35 a foot, you're saying, right?
That's what Marion Excavation has given us in writing, to put a 1-inch copper pipe from the stub at the Route 202 to the
So
building.
what is the $2,000 commitment?
That's what South Hadley wanted for $2,000. Instead of just a written commitment, they wanted a monetary commitment. Now, if for some reason the project doesn't go through, the money gets returned to the business owner or property owner.
That's their tie-up fee, Jay, isn't it? Isn't that their tie-up fee? $2,000.
I believe that's what it is. It's $2,000 to put a meter on your building if you're within 100 feet. But if you're over 100 feet from the road, the cost is $3,000 because they're gonna put the meter right at the stub. And that way, if something breaks in between time, South Hadley's not losing water. That's the way they explained it. In other words, if you have a long run from the road and for some reason the pipe breaks and their water from the Quabbin is going any which direction, but not hitting your meter yet, South Hadley has to eat it. So they have a policy, 100 feet or less, it's $2,000. We'll put it on your building. 101 feet or more, it's 3,000, and we put it at the stub. And we should get an account in a couple days, 31 October. But I don't foresee us not making the 40%, to be honest with you. Just based on, because Kathy Leonard sends me an email. I got this check today. I got a check from this one today. And like I said, there's only like 18 buildings. I know Subway is a yes. All Power is a no. AJ's is a no. And we don't know if AJ's is even going to exist after this upgrade. Because they're already a pre-existing non-conformance. And you take 11 feet off that side of the road, they're not going to have too much left there. Because from what I've been told, Mass DOT is widening the road by 11 feet. And they're taking the 11 feet all off of the right-hand side there because the left-hand side is in a gully. That's what I was told. I don't know the legal implications. Darcy, I know, is fighting them, but that's between him and them. I'm not involved. But coming down Route 202, they were looking, taking it 5.5 feet on either side, doing it equally. But if you look where the annex is, where that shale is right there, there's no way they could take 5.5 feet off that side. So they're going to have to use 11 feet on the other side if they're going to do the project the way as designed. And I guess the same thing works out by the old street lumber company. Because of all that goes downhill on street lumber, they're not going to bring in all the fill to fill that. They're just taking the land to the right of it. So that's as much as I know about the project. And I say after 31 October, one or two things is going to happen. If we don't get 40%, then whoever put in for the commitment letter will get their $2,000 or $3,000 back, and then the project is just dead. That's the way it was explained to me. Nobody wants to go to the town for more than 1.2 million. The project has been climbing in price, just like everything. The longer you wait, the more expensive it gets. It's gone from 1.5 to 1.6, and by the time next spring, I wouldn't doubt it'll be 1.7. But we won't know until all the bids come back. Are there any more questions on the water project? Okay, now we go into grants and loans. The Mass Works grant, the town did not apply for it. We requested them to apply for it. They didn't apply for it. We still do not have a grant writer. We still do not have a planner, and we still do not have a conservation agent. All those three positions have been approved by the voters, but the town administrator has not put out the job announcements. So, and that's between him and the select board. If you watch the meetings, I always vote for it, and the other two vote no. Nothing I can do about it. The EPA structure funding loaning, that's to be determined. The town did not put in for the STRAP grant this year either. The small town road assisted program, they didn't apply. What's going on, in my honest opinion, is when you only got Chris Martin and Kathy Leonard in the office, they only can do so much. They were having issues, and I think Jim will pipe in on this, or probably Lil, trying to do what they were doing normally before COVID-19 with the planning board and the conservation stuff they were doing in addition to it. Now you add all this COVID-19 stuff in it for justifications to get reimbursed and everything like that. There's not enough manpower in that office. I mean, as a minimum, they should get a receptionist. So Kathy Leonard can just do her job instead of answering the phone or running downstairs every time somebody rings the doorbell. They need more in that area. But the Board of Health has come up with a new thing now. I don't know if you heard about it. There must be 5 air exchange per hour in the schools for the kids to go back to school. Well, once the Massachusetts Public Health put that out to our Board of Health, a lot of the municipalities, people said, well, if you need 5 air exchanges per hour for the school, what about for my public building? Aren't I as good as the school kids? So now they've enhanced it to all public buildings will have 5 air exchanges per hour. So on the school, they've hired their own engineer, Davy Engineering, and the town has hired their own energy engineer, which is Energy Management Associates, to come in and do a study of each one of their buildings and see what it's going to take to get 5 air exchanges per hour. So unless that happens, according to what I've been told, you cannot have more than 40% occupancy in that building. And that's another reason Mr. Martin doesn't want to hire somebody. Even though the money has been approved to redo the offices on the first floor of the old library. And that's about it. When it comes up in discussion, I vote for it. The other 2 vote no. That's the end of it. Economic Development Grant Upgrade. I guess that's going to be Ken, right?
Yeah, I think this is an appropriate time. Unless that's another grant, I don't know.
No, on my notes, it's grant approved and will be for mixed zones with PVPC, working with the planning board zone changes. Ken Comia to update committee for tonight.
Yeah, so great, thanks. Your conversation prior to this, I was taking notes, especially with regards to the topic about the sewer, the connections that you were discussing with some of the businesses on 202.
Now, we did have a discussion prior to the meeting. We were debating whether to put you on first or make you sit through it. And we decided to make you sit through it so you could see what was going on.
And that was very helpful for the context of this kind of initial, very rough draft of the background. So as I sent the committee, I think a lot of the initial data collection is specific to what's listed in your master plan, what's listed in the zoning bylaw, specific to mixed use. And in reviewing that, because the charge of this project is to come up with a report examining mixed uses in town, and having sat through 2 previous meetings, that there is that there are some issues with regards to having mixed use come to town. In my email that I sent to the committee last night, there were 2 questions. In my initial research, because I haven't, and having PVPC having served Granby in planning board assistance since 2014, I believe. I haven't seen anything in the files with regards to development of mixed use development, knowing that back in 2014, the town updated its zoning to allow for that in the various districts and as an overlay. I think that it is possible that you know, there may be some issues with regards to the zoning bylaw that haven't been realized by the town with the ability of developers to come to town, other than infrastructure, identifying issues within the bylaw that could, you know, maybe be a hindrance to that type of development in the locations that you've set out. So
Do you have
my
Ken, do you have an example of that?
no, I mean, I think it was just in going through the zoning bylaw and examining other successful mixed uses around the Commonwealth. Obviously, you know, when you think of mixed use, it's more dense development. You're not necessarily going to get that in Granby. You know, but I think in the places that you've identified where you want that development, it makes sense that, you know, there's a little bit of additional density, but I feel like some of the parking standards and parking may be, and it was just because I work with boards in examining zoning bylaws specific to trying to achieve a development or trying to, I'm not going to say prohibit, but control the additional growth and development. I think that possibly the parking standards within the mixed use overlay could be a little much, you know, where it suggests, and I have it open, where it suggests that, and this is not to say that because the ability of the developer, they can rely on either the regulations of the mixed use development district, overlay district, or they can rely on the underlying zoning and develop to whichever best suits their needs. But in just reading the parking regulation with regards to the overlay, I do think that
They're feeling like, you know, the bylaws are too restrictive. They can always ask for waivers.
I understand that. But the biggest thing the landowners said, none of this is gonna happen unless the water pipeline comes in. That was their
Oh, that-
contingency. So there was
Of course it is.
nothing
That's-
really to spread until we see if the water pipeline was gonna go forward or not.
That's, you know, when you got big, deep pockets like CVS, you can put in cisterns and generators and all of that. But smaller boxes can't afford that, and that's why they need water.
I understand it.
So I'm in agreement with you, Jay.
Yeah.
We
And
need
even
water.
on Ito's there, his major, what I call it, an addition. He would like to have the water as well for the sprinkler system.
Mhm.
But again, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen.
Well, that's what shut down the chateau.
And yes,
Lack of
you're,
water.
you're right. And it has shut down some wells privately, but I have been told by some people that have problems with their wells, they won't tell anybody because if the Board of Health finds out, they may say something. But since it's a private well, they're not required to report it to the Board of Health. I see Brian smiling, so he must know that that's a fact.
Well, the town has some responsibility in this too.
I think we all do as individuals, residents, town, elected officials, committee members. I think we all should be working together as a team on a common goal to do what's best for the town of Granby.
Couldn't agree more, Jay.
So with regards to, this being a mixed use study, obviously, there are some recommendations that will come out of it. And those recommendations, at least on the onset in looking further into your zoning bylaw, is maybe addressing some different changes in the way that these sites are designed. With regards to more compact development, especially if you want a residential component on top. With that said, you're also identifying that the town is ready for, a little more more residential apartment style or condo above these buildings, above these commercial uses. I do
Yeah, one of
think
them-
that
Ken, one of the major reasons for that, we're not meeting our quota for low-income housing. Thus, we cannot put in for
Right.
any kind of grants and stuff like that. So that was part of the process on doing that, is if we could increase our low-income housing, we would become more grant eligible. And I know you
Yeah,
understand that, Ken,
and
right?
that's an important thing too. I think, yeah, the regulations suggest that the planning board would be able to grant through a special permit additional density if at least a component of those residential units, 10%, are provided through affordable housing under the definition of affordable according to DHCD. So I think that the carrot is there as far as developers who may want to develop a mixed use product with regards to maybe increasing density and also allow for residential component on there. I do think that I think that there is and that's good to know that the town and UJ are confirming that because the 10% threshold is not met. And I'll have to look at my notes and see where you are, maybe off the top of your head, but
No, we're much lower than we should be.
that obviously would be included in that inventory.
Mhm.
And can negate the ability to develop 40B housing, which I don't know if that would even be possible if developers would want to come to Granby to develop that. But yeah, so another charge of this report is to examine the opportunity for special tax assessments and TIFs and DIFs, they're called, district increment financing and tax increment financing. That was what the town administrator had, wanted some additional research on. And looking at that, usually those are for infrastructure projects, knowing that the town is currently working on and trying to cheerlead the water, the water and sewer connection on 202. I think that you may have this momentum of trying to attract that type of development. You may, and I think the master plan is very clear that it wants this type of development, and the sentiment in town is that it wants this type of development. It's trying to figure out the various ways to get that development. And
Can I ask you a question here, Ken?
yeah, go ahead, Brian.
I've learned a little bit about mixed use development in the last month or two. I've been trying to study up on it. In most communities that you work with, where do they have their mixed use zoning designations? do they take, well, I'll stop there and let you answer me.
So there, if it is a smaller community and the village center is usually where they establish this. So it's where all the town uses are. Normally, and I'm thinking of one community that I helped rezone certain parcels around, like the community house. Mind you, this is a community of less than 1,000 people, but they, are looking for, the compact development, maybe a 1 or 2 actual mixed use products where you have a professional office on the ground floor and then some apartments on the top, or but normally I think to address where within town this type of development would occur is usually there. And it's also, and I think this is an attest to how development in general occurs, is where the infrastructure is. And so I think the town had identified in 2014 and through the master plan process that because of its locations by Hadley and Chicopee and where those communities were with regards to their infrastructure expanding, that's why you identified those locations. And are trying to get development over there. And it's a slog, but you're marketing for that use. But I think, to answer your question, Brian, it's usually the village center where they identify this community setting that's usually walkable. And then for the more dense and intense type uses, like your strip mall type development, it's infrastructure.
This wouldn't be spot zoning, 4 or 5 different locations throughout the community. Basically, you'd be picking on a designated area where you already have existing business uses and so forth. Now, I also understand that from doing this reading, that a mixed-use zoning designation means that the owner has the right to choose whether he wants to have it designated as commercial or residential. But are we not defeating our purpose there?
I don't know if they'd be able to do that. I mean, that's a question for how that parcel is assessed. I mean, I think if you are going to the planning board for this type of development, they're going to choose the more intense use over residential and force the developer to develop and be permitted under the more intense use. And I think your zoning bylaw suggests that if you are saying that you're going to have a restaurant, a Starbucks on the ground floor and 2 apartments or 3 apartments on the top, you're going to develop to the more strict standards for the commercial development. And that makes sense because you're going to be, most of that access is going to be from the ground floor, right? So from the sidewalk in front of the building, you're going to somehow access that.
Okay, I just wanted to bring this up because I've seen it a couple of times.
Okay.
That they had their choice, and it just didn't make sense to me because you're kind of defeating your purpose,
Was that in town?
No, not the town of Granby, or towns within the Commonwealth that have mixed use.
I mean, normally that conversation happens at a more top level, and I think if a developer were to come to town and say, we really want to build in Granby, but here are our issues. Infrastructure is probably the biggest one, but normally then your conversation would include select board, town administrator, thinking about these other solutions like tax increment financing or special tax assessments, to suggest that there may be some incentive to developing that parcel the way that they want to, and the town would assist them with that. But yeah, I mean, I think if a developer really wants to come to town and the bylaws don't address the type of development they want, they're going to make it known to someone in town that they need to address that.
Okay, thank you.
I think mixed use and the overlay district that Granby has is, it makes development almost cost prohibitive. Because the mixed use in the overlay district, there's a lot more costs involved to develop a parcel of land. And yes, you can do commercial or some sort of business on the first floor and some residents on the second floor. But a lot of people don't want to live above a business or where there's a lot of business going on. Particularly, and this is just my thinking is, particularly in a town like Granby, that's considered rural. In a city, that would be much more normal and much more almost anticipated. I don't consider myself, I'm not a developer, but I just recently sold it, but I own land on 202 and had that zone when that zoning took place. And I looked at developing that, and because I have a building on it, but I looked at developing the rest of it. And it was in the mixed use thing, I was with somebody who was a builder, and it didn't make sense. There was all kinds of extra costs involved.
What are
And
those
so-
costs, Phil? Do you remember offhand what they were? So maybe we could look at it.
Yeah, there's sidewalks, there's lighting, there's parking. You have to big. He mentioned parking already, but there's lighting you have to have. There's sidewalks you have to have. I don't. It's been 3 or 4 years since I looked at those bylaws, but every one of them had a dollar sign next to them. Where if we had kept it, and we could have, I realized that was an option. We could keep it and use it just as a business district. And again, we never did it because I wasn't thinking of a certain type of business to come in and build. I was thinking of building a generic building similar to the one I have there, and then have businesses move into it, and we could finish off the inside the way they wanted it done.
And Bill, you could still do that. You could still do that. The planning board put that in place to kind of mimic what South Hadley Center has.
I understand.
It
What
doesn't-
I'm speaking to is the extra cost of mixed use.
Oh yeah, yep.
It's just expensive. And Granby is not a place, in my opinion, where you could get that kind of rent to justify the extra money. I'm not going to build a building to lose money on it every year. I mean, that's just my comments about it.
No, and you
I'm not a
probably
developer.
would, and Bill, you probably wouldn't. But if you were a developer that wanted to come in and put the whole host of amenities, like you were going to build a development that would have the mixed use with the apartments above, restaurants below, some other mixed business uses, again, similar to South Hadley and a lot of other communities like that, then yeah, you would do that. And it would be you get grants, you get all kinds of other funding to help do that. It's not something that, it's not saying anybody in town that owned the property would have to do that, but it opens the door for somebody that would want to do that. I mean, I can't believe that the pushback that we received with CVS. It wasn't going to survive. It's not the place for it. But developers and large big boxes and companies like that, they do the demographics, they know the traffic studies, they know what they're doing. And CVS has been very successful, and I don't think it's hurt. I can't speak to it directly, but from what I can tell, it doesn't seem like it's hurt any other business in town.
I agree with you. The biggest thing with developing the land that I owned, there was no sewer. sewer was up the street, maybe
Yep.
50 or 75 yards. I actually went to the select board and got permission to hook into it. I would need a pump to pump up to it. But then there's a strip of land of 20 feet between my property and where the sewer ends. And that person would not sign off to give me a right of way to put sewer over their property. So now I had to go out in the street. And that was complicated with the state. I mean, we looked into it. It was just complicated. I was
Sure.
going to do it not because I had a building to build. I was doing it just to have the sewer there.
Sure.
And that's one of the things we're trying to do, the water pipeline before the upgrade of Route 202 is done. Because otherwise, cutting into the state highway of Route 202 is going to be cost prohibitive,
Right.
especially during the 5-year rule.
Right. Yeah. I'm not saying we shouldn't have overlays. I'm not saying shouldn't we have mixed use. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying you need to look at it realistically as to why it doesn't happen. And it's all dollar signs.
Yeah, I mean, I think that your point is well taken, Bill. I think those are great comments to assess how either the mixed use bylaw overlay district is written with regards to those requirements. You know, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the bylaw is written in a way that you could either develop according to the general business district or the overlay. But, you know, that being said, yes, it is dollar signs. And I think there is also a suggestion that, and mind you, there are other overlays within town. So you have the north of New Ludlow Road, you have the district where you have your multifamily units on the north end of town. So, but that's important to know is the how it can be cost prohibitive, and there is a requirement for you know, design guidelines. So
Well, Ken, let me interrupt again. So
sure.
if there's members here on this committee that have suggestions on how the planning board could or should relax some of those, and they feel as though that would help bring in additional business, then I can't speak for the whole board, but I can speak for myself. I'm all ears. If there's things you think that we should relax to that you think it would make it more attractive, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I mean, as I can, and I think that having worked with the planning board almost for 2 years now, it makes sense, and you really are trying to address the issues that come before you in whatever way, and doing it through the appropriate way. And you know, you get your directors from the select board, and you take your lead from residents that come to town that have questions about development. But yeah, so I mean, the report will provide some analysis of the zoning bylaw compared to other towns that have mixed use development. The scope is written the way it is because that was the way the request came in. I think with this, you know, there may be an address, we can maybe navigate some bylaw amendment changes that the town may want to explore in the future. And that'll be part of the recommendations. But in addition, it's the resources that are out there to maybe entice. The resources that are out there to entice, so either grant programs, like Jay was, you know, listing all the grants, or doing an additional specific corridor study that mass development can do. And they do every year, and tying it to the priorities you have listed on your master plan. I worked with the town of Hadley. I didn't hear if they got this grant, but it was specific to what to do with the Hampshire Mall and that corridor up there on Russell Street. And, well, thinking about the future, knowing that Route 9 is widening, and the issue with indoor malls in general, they're becoming obsolete, and they're now being thought of as a different use, and trying to figure out how to maybe take advantage of that. But I could foresee possibly looking at that specific corridor and having your real estate professionals look at that and see, try to figure out and navigate some of the nuance of developing where I think that you could maximize the potential of that corridor and that area. But that would come in a set of recommendations. So, and that's why I think it's helpful that we have Lil and Jason from the planning board, who's not on this call, but to include the planning board's conversation, or include it, to have a conversation with the planning board members as well, knowing that more than likely they would be responsible for some of these changes that come before the board, in addition to policy and ideas that would be enacted by the select board and town meeting. But what I gave you was some initial background. I'm doing the analysis. It's been very helpful to hear from Bill, and some of the comments I've been finding in the files that I have with regards to economic development in town. I know that Jay had briefly discussed maybe two meetings ago, maybe the initial meeting, with regards to the development by the Westover, those parcels south of, I think it's New Ludlow Road.
No, it's actually East Street.
East Street, that's right. But looking at that, and I know the planning board has identified that as a location that they are looking to so just taking into consideration where you've already identified where your mixed uses are and where those types of uses could occur, I think they make sense where they are. I don't really think there's as far as where they're located, it makes sense that they're located there. You've went through a planning process which the community identified these locations, the village center, you've identified that as an area where mixed use development could occur, as well as an overlay over the general business zone on the west side of the town.
Hey, Jay,
Yeah, I'm right here.
the planning board's been discussing all this. The area on New Ludlow Road, on the Westover side, East Street, the whole East Street corridor is basically a commercial zone anyway because of traffic. And we've had plenty of discussion about it, but the problem is it's hard to move forward with anything right now because of COVID. We can't schedule any hearings with proposed changes for zoning until the select board 6 weeks prior to a town meeting.
Well,
So,
a lot of
and I-
this actually is out of the select board's control. It's all in the Board of Health. Because
Yeah.
depending on the status of our town, what the Board of Health defines on how many people can meet where, the select board really has no say on it. Governor Baker has given all that authority to the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, who they have floated down to all the local Board of Healths, who have actually, you can call it, they've deputized our police department to enforce it. There's not a whole lot that we can do, and that's the Board of Health.
I'm not pointing blame or anything. I'm just
I'm
saying
not pointing either, I'm just telling the fact, that's all.
that there's a process, and although we're in agreement with, the planning board is in agreement with you and the rest of the select board about looking at these zoning changes, we're kind of handcuffed with this COVID thing because we can't hold hearings within 6 weeks prior to a town meeting to to bring it to the town as an article for vote.
I understand completely. And to add to that, I was going to an economic development meeting before COVID-19 at least once a quarter. Trying to remember what was the guy's name, owns Jiminy Peak. Forget his name now. I bumped into him a couple of times. And he's a very smart individual. Hancock, Mass has one of the lowest property taxes because he pays so much. But he says he makes so much of Jiminy Peak as a resort area and stuff like that. And you go to these economic, you can call them summits, meetings, whatever you want to call them, and you listen to all the presentations. And then at the end, when you have your networking section, they basically say, anybody with infrastructure on this side of the room, anybody without infrastructure on that side of the room, and if you're on that side of the room, no businesses come over. If there's people with infrastructure in place, businesses are not going to go where there is no infrastructure in place. Unfortunately, that's the way it's been. But now with COVID-19, I don't go to any more of these seminars, meetings, whatever you want to call them. But that's one of the things that really struck me on how much in Western Mass, there is a lot of infrastructure out there that is not being used. For example, I'll give you Hatfield. You know, they got a grant from Mass Works to extend their infrastructure 2 miles on Route 5. But if you don't apply for it, it's like unemployment. You don't get it. And Granby is not applying for any of this stuff. I can't drive that point home enough. And when you got 2 people in the select board office, that is not enough. But I'm going on deaf ears. I bring all this word back. I tell them what's going on, but I can't do anything with it. And it gets to be frustrating after a while.
That's
You go out
exactly
with
what
all
I
the
was
business
thinking about
cards
with
and all that.
regards to Hatfield. Jay, you brought up a great point.
Yep.
The Mass Works grant in Hatfield, because I
Yep.
worked on some of the bylaw changes that were required for them to apply for that grant.
Mhm.
They designated a site as a expedited permitting parcel. It's an industrial parcel right off Route 5. And they got that Mass Work grant to provide the infrastructure to allow for that parcel to be developed there.
Yep.
So it is, you know, it's one thing to have all your priorities listed somewhere, and the priorities are great because you have the
Mhm.
community sentiment. It's the action.
Yes.
You know, and obviously I don't necessarily know everything that's going on in Granby, but you know, understanding that the efficiency of applying for the grants, knowing that you have these town documents to guide you to the appropriate granting aid authorities is the important thing. So,
Mhm.
like I mentioned, and maybe it's something that I bring up with the planning board the next go around for the funding for that mass development grant with regards to that center.
I really truly believe that Granby has never put in for a Mass Works grant. And here's one of the things I have learned from these economic seminars. The state has so much money to put out, and they are competitive. But if a municipality, 1 out of the 351, has never gotten one of those specific named grants before, and they apply for them, they're moved to the top because the state is trying to spread the wealth, shall you say. I can see Ken knows already. So if you don't apply for this stuff, your priority gets higher, but you will never get it. Like I keep saying, if you don't apply for unemployment, you don't get it. And that is where we have to start. And if you go to these economic seminars, when they divide the room up, you can learn a lot from your counterparts that don't have infrastructure on what their ideas is to do it. Then you walk to the other side of the room with the towns or municipalities that have infrastructure and look how fast they're moving forward. Like there was one interesting fact that came out. Does anybody, and I'm not trying to be mean or anything, anybody know where the first water district in the state was? What municipality the first water district pipe in the state? If you don't know, I'll tell you. It was Boston. It was Boston. And do you know when it was installed? 1820. So here you got communities in the eastern part of the state that has had infrastructure for 200 years. And look how they're blossoming. And we have municipalities in the western part of the state that don't have infrastructure. And I've gone to Senator Eric Lesser to a number of these east-west rail things. You know what you hear? Take all where you can live in Western Mass, but you can work in the east. Come that way in the train. And I say, why can't you go both ways on the train? And their answer is, because there's no infrastructure in Western Mass. At these economic summits, these businesses, when they learn you're from Western Mass and you have infrastructure, they want to talk to you first. They don't want to talk to the east and they don't want to talk to central because it's less expensive in Western Mass to put these companies and businesses in if you have the infrastructure. And they want to come, but they have to go where the infrastructure is. I've learned that over the last 2.5 years, drilled into my head over and over again. And like I said, if the water project dies, anything that was proposed before COVID-19 that could possibly be regenerated won't happen. And the only thing I'll say with the smaller stores, there was a lot of, I don't want to use the word dismay, but there was a lot of individuals talking bad about Dollar General. Nothing wrong with Dollar General. It saved us a lot during this pandemic by having the necessities close to home. That's in my opinion, because we do use Dollar General and they have a lot of necessities there. I don't care if it's cleaning supplies, toilet paper, whatever you want to call it, it's there. But you go to Big Y, Big Y is empty. Big Y is empty. That was, Ken, you got pretty much done with yours?
Yeah,
you would
that's
Okay.
been very helpful. I'm hoping that, I'll continue to slog along. If there's any information that I need, I will reach out to the committee. I'm hoping, I don't know if based on one of your agenda items that you may be meeting earlier than the next scheduled meeting. But if you are, I'd like to at least share that with you, or maybe.
Yeah, we have no problem. When we have a meeting, we'll just add you to the list. It's as easy as putting you in my address book and in that economic development group, and then you can automatically get an email when I send it out to the other guys.
Okay,
Oh, excuse me, other people. I forgot. We got Lil here.
I will, as I progress, I will share with the committee.
Okay.
But and reach out to individuals on the committee that may help. I think, Bill, you have provided a lot of fodder for some of the context for why it's possible that Granby hasn't seen any mixed use development after it celebrated, you know, in 2014, adding these new districts. It's important. It's important to realize, you know, some of the
Well,
shortcomings.
Bill hit it on the head. It's money.
Yeah,
It's money.
it's
And
money.
if you have infrastructure, you just cut the overhead costs down for a business, for the majority of business, so to say. I'm not gonna say for all, for
Right.
the majority.
But,
If you
but
have
trying to find those resources to get the infrastructure there, or at least be knowledgeable enough to share that with developers that may want to come to town,
Right.
and work through that. But
In my honest opinion, the first thing we have to do is we have to put more resources in the select board's office, so we have the ability to apply for grants on a regular basis. Because right now in COVID-19, there's over 100 federal grants right now. Who's got time to review to see if you can qualify for 100 federal grants? I know you never could qualify for them all, but which ones do you qualify so you can apply? It's not being done.
well,
It's
I
just
mean,
not being done.
and Jay, not to beat a dead horse, I think another concept of applying for the grant is administering the grant, and how difficult that is to ensure that you get all of that paperwork in your reporting to the granting agencies, you know, based on understanding of the capacity in the town. You know, that's just, just a comment to that. But
For 2 years, I've been trying to get the community compact updated to the state. Does everybody here know what the community compact is? Okay, community compact is the Baker Polito administration. You can look it up on their website, mass.gov. They want to know by community what your top 2 priorities are. So when grants and other funds come out, you automatically get extra points because you identified that as a community compact for yours. Right, Ken?
right,
Yeah. You know, the last time Granby's community compact was updated? 2015. And I've been trying for over 2 years to get it updated and haven't been successful yet. The big people who made out this time is if they had information technologies down as one of their community compacts. Because with the COVID and everything remote, they're getting big bucks for all the computers, the servers, the hardware, everything. Not for studies, for actual equipment. Because you have to have the studies done in advance to justify the need. And Granby has spent a lot of money on studies, and that's where they sit. It is in a study. Okay, I only have 2 items under new business, and then we'll get going, and they're gonna be real quick. Because I provided everybody with the Small Businesses Administration COVID-19 grants, one for 5 or less employees, one for 50 or less employees. All I can say is I'm doing everything possible to get the word out to the Granby businesses about this, because this ends November the 12th. You must have your application in by November the 12th. So I'm using every opportunity, if I'm on GCAM or whatever, to try and put this word out, to tell all the people on the committees I'm with, to tell my friends, email it, get it out. Because on the regional one that we got approved with East Hampton, Hadley, South Hadley, there's 6 communities altogether. I know you know what I'm talking about, Ken. I just don't have the other communities in my head. We got $900,000. We have 316 registered businesses in Granby. And whatever it's worth, they made me an ambassador of this, what do you call it? 5 or less grant opportunity, because I've been showing up at all these economic developments, so they made me a so-called ambassador. Out of the 316 registered business in Granby, only 4 of them have applied. And that's a combination of 50 and under and 5 and under. 4 businesses due to Granby's lack of communication. Get out to the people. Did anybody here ever think there was 316 businesses registered in Granby? Bill might have known that.
I did not know that.
It came from the assessor's office in the town clerk. That's where I got the information from. But when I go back to the people administrating the grants, because I can get a spreadsheet and see what towns and what individual companies applied, there's only 4 companies in Granby that applied. And the window to get that information out by Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito was 3 weeks. The 22nd of September to the 12th of November. He announced that it starts open today and it closes in 3 weeks. Maybe that's something else that we have to consider, is how we communicate within our town. And I know Brian's got more experience than probably all of us put together as far as the select board stuff, but I don't have an answer. And if this water pipe doesn't go through, I'll have less of an answer to try and entice people to come to Granby. So with that being said, the 5 or less, you have a limit of $10,000 per business. For 50 or less businesses, you have a $75,000 limit to recoup any losses you've had from COVID-19. What they do is you give your 2019 earnings by month, and you compare it against your 2020 earnings per month, and the business has to be registered in business prior, I'm going to say 1 March. I'm not sure if it's 1 March or 1 January of 2019. If you're a registered business, you're automatically qualified. Now what you got to do is justify your losses to get the money. And if you look in Granby, one of the reasons that we have so many businesses registered, carpenters, electricians, plumbers, all the sole proprietorships, the people working out of their house, those are all considered businesses and they're all qualified for it. But if you can't get the word to them and they don't file, oh, and I'll just throw this out there because we're on GCAM. If you're one of the micro businesses for 5 or less, they have agencies that'll do the paperwork for you. You just got to give them the data. For 50 or less, you got to do your own. So, any questions for me? Anything anybody like to share with anybody else on the committee before we bring it to a halt? On a check, do you think it was a productive meeting or not? Because if it's not a productive meeting, that I don't think we should be meeting. I see a lot of thumbs up, so. Okay, with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Your turn, Bill.
So move.
I'll second.
If you got that, Lil, Bill made the motion to adjourn, seconded by Brian. All in
Got it.
favor, say aye.
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 Aye. I heard everybody but Jim, but he's probably, I know Jim, he's ready to adjourn.
Second the motion, and I also said aye.
Oh, okay. I just didn't hear.